everyone, this is Christina with Black Tea News, and today we're going to be talking about Candace Owens and some tactics that she does to deceive her audience and some particular examples of how she's deceiving her audience. And I think it's important to talk about because obviously she has a very big platform and a lot of fans. And I think there's a lot of people who really like Candace for bursts of stuff, even like a lot of people that, you know, are in my friends group that really like her. I'm like, how well do you follow her though? Because there's been some wild stuff that has been said that I'm gonna be pointing out, or I have pointed out, but I'm concerned about some of the rhetoric that she's had as of late. Before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, which I've written about the Daily Wire beef with Candace, and I have a video that you guys can check out that covered up until the point where she went on maternity leave. But I got a lot, so you can check out my website videos. Also, if you like what I do here, you can go to the website and support on the donate page, because it does cost a stream and run my website, all the stuff you guys can support. I appreciate if you can't. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your view. And you guys can also check out different stuff at the store as well. So Candace Owens has, you know, been in the media a lot, especially after she was fired. There's a lot of things that she can't say. There's a lot of things that Daily Wire can't say, but there were some things that were mentioned in public that she commented on, particularly with Andrew Klavan. So she went on Piers Morgan's show and she said quite a few things that were very interesting that we'll be breaking down. So I want to talk about her beef with Klavan and also go through some other examples of how she'll deceive her audience. So overall, what she will do, and this is not the only way, but she will build up a straw man and say, oh, this is what they're saying. And then she'll debunk that. But she won't actually address the real complaints. So it's very easy to make a straw man and then take out the straw man instead of addressing the real issues. And then there's some other times where she's just like blatantly dishonest. So I want to start with this Andrew Klavan situation. So we'll be playing some clips from the Piers Morgan interview, her show when she was at the Daily Wire, and also Andrew Klavan's show. So this is what she said on Piers Morgan about Andrew Klavan and what he said about her and how it rose to the level of defamation.
For me, Andrew actually rose to the level of defamation when he started claiming that I had actually said things that I had never said. I mean, he flagrantly lies, and I showed that on my platform when he pretended that I did an episode suggesting that Adolf Hitler burning books was a good thing. I wasn't even speaking about Adolf Hitler. It's a nonsense to think that I would do that on my platform. And it's a trick also. It's meant to make people feel emotional. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that she's supporting Adolf Hitler. And I thought it was nasty business.
So he's defamed her for saying, oh, all this stuff about like pro-Hitler, burning books, etc. So she said she debunked it on her show. So let's watch what she actually debunked on her show, or what she claimed to have debunked.
For a Jewish person, Andrew is racially Jewish. If they're trying to sell to you that someone just like jumped up on stage and started being like, yes, I love Hitler, or like, you know, this person was just glorifying Hitler, you're probably being lied to. 99.9% of the time, it's a lie. And they do it because they have built up Adolf Hitler in our school books. They know that we instantly just recoil when we hear, oh my God, this person is supporting Hitler. So Andrew just jumps right into a Hitler hoax. And here is what he says, or at least what he says that I said. Take a listen.
But when you start saying things like some of those books Hitler burned weren't so bad, you know, I was shocked. This is something Candace actually said. I was surprised to learn that the books Hitler was burning, or the Nazis were burning, they weren't good books. They were bad books. They were socialist books.
Andrew, my friend. Andrew, my former colleague. I just don't know how you can do that. Am I broken? Like, I don't have the ability to lie like that. How could you believe that I got on my platform and I was just like, yeah, no, Adolf Hitler, like when he was burning books, it was great. I just thought it would be totally fine for me to do that. Of course, that's not what happened at all. Actually, I wasn't even talking about Adolf Hitler. It was an episode that I was doing on psychology, and I was talking about how a lot of the people that have brought forth modern ideas of psychology were perverts. And I listed 3 Christians among those psychologists. And the psychologist he is referring to is Magnus Hirschfeld. He happens to be Jewish, but that wasn't important to me. I was just talking about psychology. It was no more important than the Christians that I had mentioned on that episode. Didn't need to mention that they were Christian, just the fact that they were perverts. And so what he's doing here is he's actually defending a pervert, Magnus Hirschfeld, by pretending that he is Adolf Hitler and that I said, oh my gosh, it's so great that his books were burned. No, I just introduced a fact. An actual fact that lives on the Holocaust Museum website. It's a fact that Magnus Hirschfeld's Sex Institute was burned to the ground by student protesters. Literal fact from the Holocaust Museum website. And here's what I actually said thereafter. In my view, he's a pervert. Doesn't mean that his library or his institute should have been burned down. There's no excuse for burning down an institute. There it is, you guys. Does that sound like someone who's supporting the burning of books in any capacity? No. And that's why he never showed the clip, of course. Am I supposed to believe that he didn't have access to the clips and the statements that I made at the Daily Wire? That he's not subjected to the same fact-checking process that I was subjected to every day that I was at the Daily Wire? That he just couldn't find out what it was that I actually said? Of course he could. He just wanted to lie, and he wanted to smear me. And I think that that is awful. I think that's really awful.
She's saying, oh, it's interesting that they didn't really go through the clip and they must have known that I didn't support actual book burning. Let's actually go and look at what Andrew Klavan said. I know she played a snippet of what he said, but it's very clear to me from the context of Andrew Klavan's rant about her why he's upset.
But when you start saying things like some of those books Hitler burned weren't so bad. You know, I was shocked. This is something Candace actually said. I was surprised to learn that the books Hitler was burning or the Nazis were burning, they weren't good books. They were bad books. They were socialist books. so you know, they burn. That's true. Burning the book is the act of a savage, first of all. And when you start with burning books, you start burning people. But they burned Joseph Conrad, one of my favorite writers, Kafka, Hemingway, Jack London, and yes, some socialists, some of whom were extremely talented and some of whom were extremely interesting, like Karl Marx is an extremely interesting writer with whom I deeply, deeply disagree, but I don't burn his books because I'm not a savage. When you start saying that, that's a dog whistle. I'm sorry. I know it's a leftist phrase. I know they use it, randomly with anything you say. I understand all of that. Still, the depredations of the Nazis against the Jews are one of the most well-documented, recorded atrocities in human history because they're Germans. They're Germans. They keep records. They keep very good records. We know these things happen. They weren't burning books. They also hated Einstein because his science was Jewish science. They hated Mendelssohn, one of their great composers, because his music was Jewish music. That's the way they thought. It's lunacy. It's lunacy to think that way. So when you start to say, well, some of those books they burned are bad books, I'm sorry. That's a dog whistle. When you retweet a post saying a Jew is drunk on Christian blood, which goes back, as I'm sure you know, to old blood libel that Jews eat Christian children, that's a dog whistle. When you start to refer in this kind of clever way to certain group of people in Hollywood corrupting blacks and killing Michael Jackson, you're not allowed to then put on an innocent look and say, well, I'm just saying there's certain people, just a few, it's not, I'm just saying, you're messing with us. You're messing with us, and everyone knows it, and no one is fooled except those people who want to pretend to be fooled because they hate the Jews.
Okay, so he is upset, not merely because she went out there and was pro-book burning. He's upset because she ran a segment about these brown shirts and just referred to them as student activists as if they were like Turning Point USA and oh, these books. Oh, did you know what kind of books they burned? They burned these bad books. And granted, the segment wasn't about all the books that they burned, but the context there was, oh, I never knew this. They burned some really bad books out there. And she's phrasing it as if they did the book burning as if it was some kind of moral good. When the truth is that they just didn't like ideologies that conflicted with their own, and they didn't like Jews. So they burned a lot of stuff from Jewish thinkers and writers and so on. So that's clearly Klavan's complaint. But she's like, oh, well, they why didn't they play this clip of me saying or talk about how I said I didn't want the books to be burned, or how I'm not saying that the books ought to be burned. His issue isn't you saying that these books should have been burned. His issue is making it seem like they were like a book burning Moms for Liberty club, when that's just not the case. So that's his thing, right? So let's look at what she actually said on that day.
Which, by the way, brings me to number 2 on the did you know question, because this really blew my mind. Do you know which books the Nazis were burning? And I'm asking you this, and I'm telling you why it blew my mind, is because definitely something that we covered extensively, and you will cover extensively throughout the public education system, is the Holocaust, Nazi Germany. It's why so many people, when they're commenting, it seems like the only historical reference they have is, it's just like Hitler, they're literally Nazis. So that obsession with only referring to that historical aspect is partially because when you're in the public school system, you really focus on World War II and the Nazis. So I was shocked that I never learned throughout that schooling that the brown shirts, the student activists that went around burning a bunch of books, were burning books that they deemed to be Marxist and that they deemed to be overtly sexual. And one of the first and most notorious book burnings was the student-led destruction of the library at the Institute for Sexual Research. That library was founded by a man named Magnus Hirschfeld, and he was the guy who actually first coined the term transsexual.
So when I saw that segment, and I think I saw that before I saw Klavan's rant about it, I didn't like it. It made me raise my, not well-groomed eyebrows. Especially because this is on top of a list of other things that made me a bit concerned about where she was going. And again, I have a video that covers up until like the time she went on maternity leave. And she did things after that point in time that were questionable. But even like her interview with Ami Kozak.
Well, I hope you thought that I listened to you entirely. I don't buy that you think everybody's anti-Semitic. I don't buy that you think I'm anti-Semitic.
Right. I wouldn't say that I would say she's anti-Semitic, but on a scale, if it was on a scale of like Candace being anti-Semitic and not being anti-Semitic, and we're somewhere in the middle, like I wouldn't have moved the dial over to the not anti-Semitic section after the interview, because there was just some moments that were really questionable. So anyway, he was correct in his assessment about Candace. He didn't say anything dishonest, but how she presented his argument, complaints about her, was dishonest. And maybe it was a mistake and she was just in her feels about it. But this is a pattern with Candace, though, that she will present something like a straw man, sometimes like hyper exaggerated, and then she'll attack that straw man, and then she'll be like, I won, I own them, or whatever. So I want to, before I get to some other things that she did in this interview and some other dishonest stuff that she was talking about, I want to give you some examples. So when Kanye West did his DEFCON 3 comments, Candace Owens went on her show and she defended him. And she, I don't know, had like a bit of a fantastical rant that she had going on. So let me play that for you guys.
I'm a bit sleepy tonight, but when I wake up, I'm going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. The funny thing is I actually can't be anti-Semitic because Black people are actually Jew also. You guys have toyed with me and tried to blackball anyone who opposes your agenda. That was the tweet. And people subsequently demanded that the tweet be taken down for anti-Semitism. Now, if you are an honest person, you did not think this tweet was anti-Semitic. You did not think that he wrote this tweet because he hates or wants to genocide Jewish people. This does not represent the beginning of the Holocaust. That's if you're an honest person, you'll admit that. You will admit that, right? If you're an honest person, when you read this tweet, you had no idea what the hell he was talking about. I had no idea when I read this tweet what the hell he was talking about. This tweet inspired questions, not answers. First and foremost, what is DEFCON 3? Did he mean DEFCON 3, which would be a military defense position, not an offense for those of you that are offended, a military defense position? Is he tweeting this because he's reading the Newsweek headline calling him an anti-Semitic? Is he angry because he can't believe that he's not free to talk about people in his life who happen to be Jewish, right? Without being accused of anti-Semitism? Is he saying, I'm not going to shut up and I'm going to keep tweeting and I'm going to keep calling these people out, referring to his friends that he feels slighted by? Is he talking about Jared Kushner and Josh Kushner? If you're a liar, you'll say, I was scared, Candace. I actually thought that Kanye West was going to launch a military strike in Israel.
Now, with the DEFCON 3 comment, I think any honest person would say that since he didn't even know that it wasn't DEFCON, and he spelled it wrong, that he probably didn't know that it was a defensive position. and that honest people didn't expect Kanye to literally go and blow them up. So it was a weird rant for her in the first place. They probably just, I read that and he's about to go off on the Jews. That's what I read and interpreted as. But to hype up this like, oh, everyone's scared. I think people were concerned because he has a lot of influence. He has a lot of followers and people were demanding that it be taken down. And I think that got him like maybe banned for a little while. And I wasn't calling for that. And I know other people were because they thought it was so hateful and whatever. But for everyone to be afraid, like as if he was about to like launch some rockets. No one thought that. No one in their right mind would think that. So what's with the big exaggeration sort of thing? Another example on how she does this is her defense of the liked tweet about drinking Christian blood, right? So back in March, she made this thread. For the last week, my former colleague at the Daily Wire, Andrew Klavan, has been spreading some inaccuracies about me that I view to be disparaging to my character. So let's slowly unpack his claims here publicly. Andrew Klavan, in an attempt to explain why Crisis King can be anti-Semitic, offered this on a podcast about me.
Totally fair question. And it was because one of our major talents at the Daily Wire the Daily Wire parted ways with Candace Owens. And part of it was things that she was saying that we felt were strongly anti-Semitic. And she was doing it in such a way that it was kind of hard to pin down. So I was trying to show where these things happen. So for instance, she retweeted a tweet accusing a Jewish guy of being drunk on Christian blood, which is, of course, an ancient slander against the Jews, that they eat Christian children.
Wow, that sounds crazy. Candace Owens hates Jews so much that she's randomly accusing some fine Jew of drinking Christian blood. Crazy. Also untrue and completely removed from some important context. 1, I never reposted anything. I certainly did like a tweet. However, what is the appropriate context? The Jew Andrew Klavan is referring to as Rabbi Shmuley, who spent 2 years attacking me. No one, not a single one of my colleagues included, defended or said what he was doing was wrong. After 2 years, I told the public about Rabbi Shmuley's nonstop harassment, plus showed proof of his tweets. What did Rabbi Shmuley do in return? He libeled me harder. He accused me of directing my followers to murder Jews. I'm not kidding. This is what he tweeted. I wonder, she mentioned her colleagues didn't help her. Did she I don't know, tell them? Because Klavan said he didn't know who Rabbi Shmuley was. And I didn't know who he was. And she said she didn't tell the public about the harassment until about 2 years. So The rabbi was clearly lying. The person who messaged him privately in that correspondence did so before I had ever informed the public about his harassment. It was quite literally a smear. Gratefully, someone called him out on this lie by citing the date of the message. That is a tweet I liked. I liked some random person on the internet who very quickly debunked the horrendous lie that I would ever send any person to threaten to murder Jews. Now that you have the full context, please revisit Andrew's remarks about my anti-Semitism. Yeah, Candace, people weren't upset because they thought you were accusing some random person of drinking Christian blood. They were upset that you liked a tweet that had a blood libel in it about drinking Christian blood. That's why people were upset that you liked the tweet. That's all the context. You can provide more context, but it doesn't erase why people were upset. And you didn't need to do the hyper, wow, that's crazy tweet. I'm not gonna say nobody thought that, but that's not why people are upset. People are just upset that you liked it. Because even if this person was defending you and debunked someone who was terrible, and that Shmuley guy, he's awful. Gosh, did you see that crazy costume he made? I'm not even gonna show it to you guys, but awful dude. And I'd be embarrassed if I was him. Even if you're like, oh, I'm grateful for this, I'm not gonna like that tweet though. You know, because it's got that blood libel in it. I'm not gonna like that. And after liking this tweet, that's when she pretty much got fired. There were different articles that came out, but I don't know if this was the final thing, like the last like Jenga piece that got pushed out that made everything collapse. But it's not like this was a standalone incident where they thought of like anti-Semitism coming from Candace. It's not a standalone thing. I recently learned that anti-Semitism is unlike any hate in the world because the definition mutates. Today's current definition seems to be a Christian defending herself from a predatory, dishonest rabbi by liking a tweet for the obvious reason that it debunked his lie. It really is nothing short of amazing that given all the threats that Rabbi Shmuley made against me, what seemingly disturbed Andrew, or at least what moved him to action, was my unacceptable like of a tweet which underscored the rabbi's dishonesty. Really something. No, I think the really something is that you liked a tweet that had the drinking the blood of Christians in it. And that's it. Like you said, you know, you liked it for the obvious reason it debunked his lie. I think for obvious reasons, you shouldn't have liked the tweet. So, and she can disagree with people. Like, she could be like, you know what? I understand. This is what happened. This is why I did it. I totally understand why people are upset about it. I didn't mean anything, you know, anti-Semitic by it, etc. Blah, blah, blah. That's what she could have done. But that's not what she did. Okay. So those are just some examples. So anyway, I will also want to get back to the Christ is King.
Andrew, for 5 entire months, had been seething. I mean, unbeknownst to me, never mentioned it to me, never when I saw him, over a tweet that I had sent last November where I shared a Bible verse. And I ended the Bible verse, here it is, take a look at it, by saying Christ is King. It's just a Bible verse, okay? You will note that nobody is tagged in this verse. This was not a response to any thread. It was a standalone tweet. But remember, Andrew is lying his face off, right? So he says, okay, this is the tweet that upset me. Now I'm just going to pretend that this tweet was delivered in a different way. And here is how he lies again.
The truth that hid wickedness, that I thought was the most wicked truth to use, was the truth that Christ is King. You know, when you spit that phrase at Ben Shapiro, that she used Christ as King in an argument with Ben Shapiro, where it obviously carried this weight. And so that's why I was addressing it.
So there you have it. No, of course, I did not spit that phrase at a Jew. I just tweeted it all by itself. I did not use that phrase in an argument with a Jew. I just used that phrase at the end of a Bible verse because that's an appropriate time to use that phrase when I was calling for peace after actually somebody insulted me and called me faux sophisticated. And it was meant as nothing more than, I'm calling for peace. That's it. Christ is King of my heart. I don't need this drama because, if you remember, I was 38 weeks pregnant. I think he attacked himself in the process. He showed his own character. As he was trying to attack mine, he revealed his own character. But you have to ask yourself, what gave Andrew the courage to lie so belligerently? Other than the fact that, by the way, the person in charge of fact-checking at the Daily Wire, the general counsel, is his son-in-law. So I think that probably helped it get through the fact checks. His married to Andrew's son.
So the thing about the Christ is King tweets that she went back and forth with Ben. This is another example where she like totally created a situation out of thin air in her response to Ben. The scriptures were Matthew 5:9-11. Next one was Matthew 6:24. So it jumps. So it's two different passages, and then the Christ is King. So she tweeted out, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake." And then it jumps to the next chapter, chapter 6, verse 24. "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." And then she ended it with Christ as King. And then Ben Shapiro the next day said, "Candace, if you feel that taking money from the Daily Wire somehow comes between you and God, by all means quit." Then she responded with, "You have been acting unprofessional and emotionally unhinged for weeks now, and we have all had to sit back and allow it, and have all tried to exercise exceeding understanding for your raw emotion. But you cross a certain line when you come for scripture and read yourself into it. I will not tolerate it." She also retweeted Ben and said, "You are utterly out of line for suggesting that I cannot quote biblical scripture. The Bible is not about you." And she should have said, "This tweet is not about you," not the Bible is not about you. But Ben didn't actually say that you're not allowed to post Bible scriptures. Now, I have a lot of questions about why she tweeted what she did, because it did seem to be a reaction to people talking about you, particularly Ben talking about you. It's going viral. The timing seems suspect. I don't know if I can just believe that that she didn't have in mind when she wrote that. But does she think that she's being persecuted for Christ's sake? Because the takes that she's made has nothing to do with being persecuted for Christ's sake. So that doesn't really fit. And you could say, well, maybe she was just reading the Bible and she just thought of that verse and she put it up there.
That phrase, if you're talking about when it began to be a scandal, because I think everyone was quite confused when there was suddenly this narrative that it could be construed as anti-Semitic, which is why it required so much explaining by people of when it became anti-Semitic. I posted a standalone Bible verse, this is just a pure fact, calling for peace. And at the end of the verse, I ended it and said, "Christ is King," last November. Andrew Klavan references that. The reason why this even became a scandal is because of Andrew Klavan. Andrew Klavan did an episode called "Because Christ is Really King," and then he accused me wrongly of spitting that phrase at a Jew. That simply never happened, as I showed in my first episode back. We just made that up out of thin air. I posted a standalone Bible verse and I wrote at the end of it, "Christ is King." And then a Jew responded to me telling me to quit my job. So what happens sometimes is then time passes and people try to rewrite history, but we're not going to do revisionist history here. I tweeted "Christ is King" appropriately following a Bible verse when I was 38 weeks pregnant. And I stand by that proverb, and I stand by my declaring Christ to be King, as I have done many times in the past, because it's basic Christian doctrine.
Two things about that. Why would you tweet that particular passage from the Bible, ending "Christ is King," on 14th of November 2023? What was your motivation?
Yeah, happy to answer that question. So if people remember what was happening at that time, Ben Shapiro was caught on a tape calling me faux sophisticated and some other stuff, a disgrace, I think was the term. And again, I was 38 weeks pregnant, about to give birth. And my husband just told me, every media person in the world is contacting you globally, asking you to give a comment, to say something. It's obviously a very traumatizing thing to go through in the moment when you're that pregnant and suddenly you're like, I just don't want to deal with this drama. I don't mean like trauma in the very leftist. I feel traumatized by this, but just it's a lot happening leading up to birth. And my husband told me to read the Bible. He said, just read the Bible. You don't have to answer these media members. You don't have to give a comment. You don't have to say anything. These things are all fickle.
But the question is, why did she combine it with the verses from that next chapter about serving two masters and the love of money? People could question, are you saying that your job is more important, that you're not gonna let your job stop you from telling the truth, or that other people are serving money rather than serving God? Is there a dual loyalty sort of approach to the scriptures? So there's a lot for Ben to speculate if he was upset. Regardless, everyone believed that this was about Ben, and she said herself admitted that this was a response. Ben ended up posting in response, Candace, we feel like taking money from the Daily Wire somehow comes between you and God. By all means, quit. But you cross a certain line when you come for scripture and try to read yourself into it. I will not tolerate it. So at what point in Ben's response is he coming for scripture? He's very clearly coming for her. And again, everyone can tell that this is a response to him. So you're saying no one can serve two masters. Well, who are the masters you're talking about, Candace? One is God and who's the other one? And said, you are utterly out of line for suggesting that I cannot quote biblical scripture. The Bible is not about you. And then she wrote, Christ is king. Okay. So Ben did not tell her that she could not quote scripture. Ben did not say that. But then she wrote Christ is king, which is like the exclamation point after she told him off. So I wouldn't say she did that in order to glorify God and to lift up Christ in the kingdom. That was her exclamation point. And now she's even selling Christ as king tumblers and is telling people, oh, when people upset you or whatever, come at you, just, raise up your Candace, cup or whatever that looks like a fetus with an alien coming out of its belly. So her logo looks crazy.
I really do want to thank Andrew Klavan for the inspiration to launch the Standus cups. So many things you can do. It withstand us any temperature. If you have a disagreement with somebody and you want them to understand you, these cups are going to be absolutely amazing. Not to be confused with Stanley cups. Those are basic.
So that's the Christ is king situation with the tweet. So she was not being honest about how all that went down.
Right. A lot of attention has been focused on you constantly referencing Christ is king. Many people believing that although those words in themselves, if you're a Christian, as you are, would not be offensive, that to Jewish people, when they're being whipped up on social media, as they were at the time, by people who are genuine white supremacists and pretty brazen anti-Semites, that being smart as you are, you would have known that to deliberately use that phrase repeatedly in that time, in that climate, was a deliberate act of provocation to people like Ben Shapiro, who obviously are extremely high-profile Jewish people.
Now you have in the universities, in the media, in Hollywood, in finance, in government, and some people say, well, they're not all Jewish. It's like, okay, well, it's half, or 2/3, or 3/4. And what's the other quarter? What's the other third? What's the other half? It's not Catholics. It's not hardcore God-believing Christians. It's all kinds of other atheists, nihilists, postmodernists, whatever you want to call it. And so I don't want to say, hey, let's all attack one group, but there's a big problem when the leadership isn't Christian. We have big problems as a society when the people aren't Christian. What happens when the king and queen aren't Christian? What happens when the aristocracy isn't Christian? What happens when the cities and the business owners aren't Christian? Well, take a look around you. It's exactly what we have now. And so many of the problems that we can point to, which are blamed on various things, ideology, government, on other groups or populations, can be attributable to the loss of faith and the loss of any kind of adherence to an objective morality. And so, that's a long way of saying, I love Hitler. Okay?
Christ
so it's not about me, and it's not about Hitler. It's about Jesus Christ.
Look, to just be plain, I mean, let's just say the elephant in the room. It is about forcing a contradiction between Christianity and Jews. At least it is for me. I say Christ is king. Well, the reason I started saying it, because I think I'm one of the first people, I mean, not to ever utter the words, but to say them in the dissident right space. We would go to these rallies or protests, and how I brought it up was to say, look, we need to say the name because there's power in the name. We know that politicians talk about God a lot, but that could really mean anything. When we say God, I mean, you could be a Freemason, you could be a perennialist, you could be a Jew, you could honestly even be an atheist or agnostic. So I started to say, look, the difference between Groypers and everybody else is we are explicitly Christian. So we're not going to say, hey, God bless America. We're going to say, no, Jesus is the king of America. Jesus is the king of the world. And if you got a problem with that, you got to go somewhere else. So that's how that started. And that's where the Christ is king chant, I mean, it's so funny because, I mean, this is now like dominating the conversation. I feel like everyone knew just, a week ago, if you heard a Christ is king chant at a rally or a political thing, it's Groypers. It's Groypers that are doing that thing. Not to say that we own the phrase, but you understand. I think there's a big correlation there, which is why so many people are invoking Groypers or me, or rather Nick Fuentes. I'm just a Candace Owens fan club, but they'll invoke Groypers or Fuentes when they're talking about Candace Owens being canceled. So no, I don't hate them. Like I said, some of the people I respect the most, like Ron Oons, who I cite constantly, is Jewish. Disagree with him on a lot. I think he's a secular Jew. But we say Christ is king. First of all, we don't, Jews are, I think, a very narcissistic group, similar to black people in America. Not everything's about them. Saying Christ is king, to Marie's point, is an affirmation that America's Christian. And I feel like, there's something going on here where Americans get together and they talk about the way America should be. And then these Jewish people come in and they say, well, what about Israel? Well, what about us? Well, what about Jewish people? And it's like, we can say Christ is king and we can say that kind of stuff and say we would like to live in a Christian country without necessarily always having to be held hostage by these Jews. Like, do you understand how long of a shadow they cast over American life? Everybody is obsessed with the Holocaust and Israel and Hitler. I got canceled for at various points in my career for saying I'm not loyal to Israel or I don't hate Hitler. I mean, I'm not in favor of genocide or whatever, but I look at Hitler as a statesman. Hitler didn't kill my people or anything like that. So I don't own the same kind of trauma that Jews do about the Holocaust. But you get canceled for saying that in America. And that's bullshit. We need to let Americans get together and talk about who we are and what we want for our country without people that have dual allegiance. They don't even worship the same God as us. They're obsessed with the Holocaust. So that's really what it is. And I think that's the subtle tension here. And people want to say, oh, no, well, we're not trying to offend anybody. It's like, well, I actually don't give a shit about offending people. Christ is king. America's got to be Christian. So that, I don't know if that helps, but that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, another way that Candace Owens has been very dishonest, and I really wish that she would stop lying about this, frankly, is this genocide tweet that she did that most people interpreted it was about Israel. Now, she says that it was about a video that she had reposted about Mast and his genocidal comments, saying that there was no innocent Palestinians.
So in the build-up to this, you'd already made it clear that you'd said on Twitter on November the 3rd, no government anywhere has a right to commit a genocide ever. There is no justification for a genocide. I can't believe this even needs to be said or is even considered the least bit controversial to state. You didn't say what you were talking about in that tweet, but it was widely assumed to be Gaza and what Israel was doing in Gaza. Is that correct? Were you talking about Israel there?
No, actually, when I wrote that tweet, if you look right before that tweet, I had retweeted and liked something from a journalist named Yashar Ali. He had shared a clip of a Congressman, Mast, who got up on a platform and said that there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian life. That is despicable genocidal language. And I I'm paraphrasing here, but Yashar Ali said, and he's pro-Israel, by the way, if I'm judging by what he puts online, he said, can we all just admit that this language is unacceptable? And I tweeted that no government in the world, and I was actually commenting on America, genocide is always wrong. And so, by the way, even if I was talking about Israel or I was talking about Palestine, that statement should hold.
I went through a firestorm for saying, after watching Brian Mast give a speech in Congress and say there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. That is genocidal language.
Yeah.
That is crazy to say about any, no such thing as an Iraqi. Give me the worst country that you can imagine. Of course, there are innocent civilians. I mean,
Any point in human history, any person that is advocating for genocide is always in the wrong. And when I wrote that tweet, I was referring to Brian Mast, who was a congressman. He got up and he literally said in Congress that there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian.
And there's some problems with that. So her tweet about Brian Mast is not like it was in a thread. They weren't even made on the same day, but it was above it. But when she got into a back and forth with folks on the internet, particularly Dave Rubin, about it, she didn't say, hey, this isn't about Israel. This is about Brian Mast. And so Dave Rubin, he hopped on and was like, I thank you for condemning, what Hamas is doing. And she got pretty upset. So he got on there and, said, hey, Candace, I know you know that the Palestinian population has risen, but thank you for taking a strong stance against Hamas, who started a genocide against the Jews, which is in their charter. And so Candace, like, me saying genocide is always bad. Dave Rubin, why won't you condemn Hamas? Absolutely meant it. And he said, I didn't ask you to condemn them. I thanked you for condemning them, and I do so again. And so she was really upset that people were trying to pin her down in this kind of way. Now, if it was me, and my tweet was actually about Brian Mast and his disgusting comments, I would have just said that instead of playing this game for a while. She did go on her show and say that it was about Brian Mast when she was talking to Ami Kozak, and he also believed that she was talking about Israel and thought she was just kind of being a contrarian or whatever. And so she ended up playing this clip of Brian Mast on her show.
which I am being critical of my own government in this circumstance. Let's just roll the clip really quickly so people can hear what he said in Congress.
As a whole, I would encourage the other side to not so lightly throw around the idea of innocent Palestinian civilians, as is frequently said. I don't think we would so lightly throw around the term innocent Nazi civilians during World War II.
I was stunned by that. I thought that was the most despicable thing that I've ever heard.
Now, the problem with that is that Candace, to my knowledge, has never, ever explained the context of this video. David Wood actually pointed out the other day when he was going through some content with Candace that even if he did say that there's no innocent Palestinians, that's still not the same as calling for a genocide. But the context of this video was actually not talking about the civilian casualties or anything like that. They weren't talking about the day-to-day operations of the war and trying to justify the amount of collateral damage or the casualties of the war. They were discussing the Hamas International Financing Prevention Act, so they could limit particular resources that could have dual use. So if there was some kind of like farming equipment that people could take and somehow use as a weapon, they wanted to limit that because they're saying that October 7th didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened over time. And they end up, teaching the kids and all these different people some pretty bad ideology that makes them hostile towards Jews. And so they don't want to give them tools and resources that could one day be used for acts of terror.
October 7th didn't happen for free. October 7th didn't happen without planning. October 7th didn't happen without delivery of arms from multiple nations. October 7th didn't happen without the intelligence from multiple nations and non-government organizations and individuals.
He didn't say there's no innocent Palestinians. Technically, he said there's very few. But he wasn't saying that in a context of it doesn't matter if we destroy them all. He said that in the context of we have to be careful what we send them because we don't want it to one day come back to bite us. And she's, again, to my knowledge, never provided that kind of context. And she's gone on show after show after show talking about how awful and terrible and disgusting and genocidal Brian Mast is for his genocidal comments when he did call for genocide. So she's been lying about this man for at least 7 months. For at least 7 months, she's been telling this lie about this man. And again, I don't know if this actual tweet about the genocide was actually connected to Brian Mast or if that was an interesting cover. But again, what were people supposed to think? It's not connected to the retweet. It's not under the retweet. She didn't quote retweet it and then say that comment about the genocide. It's pretty vague. And then Piers tries to like pin her down on the genocide. Like, do you believe they're committing a genocide? And she says things like, oh, why are you trying to be specific about this word? And he's like, because you use the word.
And do you think, for the record, that what Israel's been doing constitutes genocide?
Well, what I've been having trouble is all of the people that are pro-Israel and say it's not a genocide won't tell me what is a genocide. What percentage of a population has to be killed before we can use the word genocide? It's a funny little thing. They won't tell you. They won't tell you what constitutes genocide. So I would like a clear understanding of how many Palestinians have to die before we are allowed to term it a genocide.
Well, it's not about a number.
Tons of people on both sides of the debate on.
Yeah, but it's not.
No. What do you mean it's not a number?
Here's my answer.
And do they give you an answer?
Well, no, because here's the point. It's not about specific numbers. It's about an intent.
But it has to be.
Well, no, it's not. It's about an intent to eradicate.
That's not true, Piers, because in America, they say that Native Americans, it was a genocide committed by white men. This is what they say, right?
No, but I'm talking about what the definition of a genocide is. Definition of genocide from the Oxford English Dictionary: the deliberate killing of a large number of people from a particular nation or ethnic group with the aim of destroying that nation or group. So by that definition, do you believe that is what's happening to the Palestinian people and it's being perpetrated by Israel?
Well, I would say is that Israel has proven in the past that they can be very specific when they want to get somebody out, whether that's a hostage or any other certain military operation. And what I am seeing happening, forgetting the specific language of a genocide, is something that I'm using my platform to speak out against, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me what the media calls me. I've had every headline. I do not believe that they are being careful in what they are doing. I think it has been it seems to me that the destruction of the hospitals and the schools and of the UN buildings. Would you say, Piers, that you believe that's unintentional? And my belief is that they are not being careful whatsoever. My belief is that there has been too much loss of Palestinian life.
But that's different to genocide, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but okay, that's fine. We don't need to. That's what I'm saying. I don't know why you're like obsessing over this one word. It doesn't matter.
Well, because you tweeted about genocide.
You told me.
I'm only trying to clear up.
It's about Brian Mast. So you're harping on this issue. There's a lot more topics that we should talk about. I'm being very clear in how I feel about this issue.
So I don't know. Based on their conversation, I would think that Candace does think that Israel is probably committing a genocide. It's inaccurate, but there's a lot of people who believe that, and she's just one of those people. But even if that is her opinion about Israel, she has been telling lies about Brian Mast and been dishonest to her audience, to people in her threads, and again on these different shows, talking about this congressman, claiming that he's like used genocidal language. So that's not appropriate, obviously, and even if you don't like someone, just you could try being honest, and you can still not like the full context, but it's not what she presented and continues to present to people. And the last thing I want to mention before I let you guys go is that she recently had Briahna Joy Gray on her show, who got fired from The Hill. Now, she's been putting out some interesting propaganda for a while, but The Hill finally had enough because they had someone on the show. Her sister had been taken by Hamas, And so she requested to get in contact to go on the show because she had seen some of the comments that Briahna had made about dismissing women who had been victimized and so on. And so she wanted the opportunity to talk to her. So she went on the show to try to, humanize her sister and explain the plight. And try to appeal to her as a woman. And Briahna just kind of kept shutting that down, trying to go real political. Well, aren't you upset that, Bibi hasn't taken the deal?
And we didn't brought the hostages back. Just think about yourself being in one of the countries inside the U.S., being attacked from Mexico, let's say like that. You think that the United States Army or the Biden administration or any other administration for that matter will be quiet until this terror group will be eliminated, that we will have this threat for the entire lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting analogy. I don't think that we would endeavor to eliminate all Mexicans if that were to happen, right? I think that we've had 7 months of a siege. I don't think that they're going to eliminate all Palestinians, but let's talk again about my sister, okay? Please.
My sister is a woman. She's 23 years old. She's being held by a group of terrorists that can do anything they want to her. You're a woman. You know how it feels like to feel unsafe, to feel like a man can control you, to hug you or touch you in a way that you don't want to. But you will have your phone and you can call your mom or the police or tell someone to come rescue you. And you still be at home, so when he will release you, maybe you can go home or go to complain. And she can't.
Yeah, Yarden, I think the question is...
do anything to help her.
I think the question is so many other hostage families who've been protesting Netanyahu seem to believe that what would help their family members come home sooner is if Netanyahu would agree to a ceasefire and a hostage release deal to really prioritize what you're saying. Prioritize getting your sister home where she can be safe and have the medical attention it seems that she very much needs.
You're very right, but sometimes throughout those deals, we saw that Hamas wasn't agreeing anything at all.
And at the very end, she ended up scoffing and rolling her eyes at this woman. And that's probably the final nail in the coffin at that point. And Candace on her show, she opened it up with like, Jews control the world.
All right, guys, happy Friday. Nothing too controversial today. Just one question. Is America a sovereign nation or are we being controlled by Israel? I know that question someday is probably going to get me arrested. I know this anti-Semitism bill is making its way through Congress. And I don't know if we're going to be able to have free speech anymore. So let me get it all out while there's still time.
This is how she talked about Briahna's video that got her fired.
But of course, Thomas Massie is wading into some dangerous water, so to speak, because we know that there was once a president who wanted to make AIPAC register as foreign, and he ended up shot. Coincidentally, ended up shot. So Thomas Massie better be careful. And it's not just what's happening down in D.C. It's also what's happening in media. We are seeing people get plucked, not because they're anti-Semitic, but because they're not pro-Israel enough. They're not happy, I guess, when an innocent Palestinian kid dies. That's what it seems like. If you are not completely doing the work of AIPAC, and if you are not willing to support every action that Bibi Netanyahu does, then the media will perpetuate you as an anti-Semite who should lose everything. And that is wrong. And there is somebody who claims that she recently just went through that. As I told you at the top, her name is Briahna Joy Gray, and she was fired. According to the headlines, it was because of her shocking response to the sister of a Hamas hostage. I'm going to let you hear what Briahna said to the sister of the Hamas hostage, and tell me if you're completely shocked by it. Take a listen to Briahna while she was at the Hill interviewing this young woman.
I'm just going to push back against the implication that in Michigan, which has the largest Muslim and Arab population in America, that there is any threat of terrorism from our own people. And I would like to clarify also that one of the rationale that was presented for 9/11 was discussed with America's support of Israel's continued occupation of Palestine. So that's neither here nor there. I really do hope that Netanyahu agrees and Israel agrees to the ceasefire deal that could bring all the hostages, including your sister, home. And I'm sure many people watching are praying for her safety.
Thank you. Me too. And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right. Thanks for joining. Stick around. More Rising coming up next.
There it is. Shocking. She seems to have rolled her eyes when the young woman told her to believe women. I mean, that hashtag just believe women, of course, is something that makes me roll my eyes as well. We want to believe our hard facts, and we want to be able to discern what is actually happening. But I'm not going to contextualize anything that Briahna did. I'm going to allow her to speak on behalf of herself.
Now, did you notice how she said she wasn't going to contextualize it, but she related it to the believe all women, kind of movement? And of course, they're women that you couldn't just believe, but women exaggerate. This woman exaggerates, or this woman could be exaggerating. I roll my eyes at those sorts of things. In the interview, at one point, the sister told Briahna about some photos that she had seen of some terrible stuff that was done toward women. And she's like, no, it was debunked. And she's like, I've seen these things with my own eyes.
Not representing anyone except myself, my sister, and the women community, maybe around the world. I can't say that I'm representing any more of that. I don't know what's going on in their meeting of the cabinet. I don't know what is going on the negotiation team. It's not my job to perform. My job is to take care of my sister and to show the world what is really going on right now. What is really going on to my sister. What has really what really happened on October 7th. I don't know if you know Zaka organization, but they have the worst pictures of what Hamas has done to the women during the October 7th attack.
Yeah,
And
unfortunately, we are very familiar with Zaka, but regrettably, the reporting has been roundly discredited by both Israeli and American media sources. So I really would like to bring this back to your sister specifically. And I want to ask you about what you make of new reports.
Because I saw the pictures with my own eyes. And when you will have a sister in a terror organization's hand, you will know the feeling of terrifying every minute of every day. Can't sleep at night, can't even drink a sip of water because I know that my sister is drinking salt water from the sea, that she's not getting food and the terrorist is eating in front of her face.
Yeah, Yardin, I really hope your sister does get water and food, and I hope that I'm sure you're aware of the ample reporting of Israel blocking aid, food and water to Gaza in a way that is hurting both the people of Gaza and the hostages, right?
Most of the trucks are getting inside Gaza. I don't know if you saw, but Hamas is blocking them from them civilians. They're not giving their own civilians the humanitarian aid that everyone is so eager to give them. And I'm not against that. I'm a nurse in my profession. I really, truly believe that everyone should live in safety, in health. This is one of the biggest crises that we ever experienced here. But I'm really feeling that everyone is taking care of the Gaza civilians like they should. But what about the hostages?
So, it was a 20-minute interview altogether, and it was uncomfortable to watch, like the whole thing. But when you get to that point at the end, with the rolling of the eyes, it's pretty grotesque. But it's interesting though. Briahna, she'll say, "Oh, Hamas, they don't want to kill the Jews."
So there has to be a one-state solution, which means that there cannot. When Hamas is talking about eliminating Israel, it's talking about not killing all of the Jews. It's about eliminating the idea.
Okay.
It's about...
Leave it there. We'll leave it there. We'll leave it there.
It's about, let me just finish, sir. Can I just finish the sentence? It's about eliminating the idea of a Jewish state. ending a Jewish state, ending an ethno-national state, and having a state more like what we have in the United States of America.
If I can just...
Do you guys actually like believe the sorts of things that she's saying? But she spread propaganda recently about this man claiming, like, when they did the hostage raid to save the hostages in Israel, the 4 people, that there was U.S. soldiers there that killed this young man's brother and had the time and all that to, burn him with like a cigarette or something. And she spread that around very easily. But when it comes to women being sexually assaulted and victimized, hey, she's going to need to see some forensic evidence before she could even believe something like that. So, which interestingly enough, Finkelstein was on Candace Owens' show. He said that, he didn't really believe the rape allegations, and she didn't push back on him at all. And she also didn't mention how he basically wrote on his Substack that the Jews got what they deserved on October the 7th, but whatever. So yeah, Candace, pretty interesting person, has told some interesting tales. Even in her rant about, the Jews controlling the world and TikTok being the Jews being the reason why it got taken down, and JFK being killed because of the Jews, and still spreading, propaganda about that bill, about the anti-Semitism bill, which it doesn't ban Christianity, or it says in the bill that this cannot like supersede or violate your First Amendment rights. It's just like a guideline for schools to interpret like discrimination. So the idea that if you say something against Israel that you're just gonna get in trouble some kind of way isn't accurate. And as a matter of fact, by the guidelines, just simply criticizing Israel is not anti-Semitic. But if you're applying some kind of standard to them that you wouldn't normally apply to other nations, then they're like, that can be construed that way. So there's just a lot of TikTok, the really what drove a nail. I mean, I can understand people being concerned about TikTok and people agreeing with Osama bin Laden about attacking America and that letter going around. Like, I was very concerned during that time. So I was very concerned during that time, and people justifying October the 7th. I do think we have a problem with, our youth today and the sort of misinformation propaganda that goes around. But the reason why they were so swift to get rid of TikTok is because of how they were mobilizing TikTok. And it was still a security concern, but the way that they were mobilizing people frightened, frankly, Congress folks, and they wrote about it, how there'd be kids just calling them, or very old people calling them saying, I just sit and watch TikTok all day, like, don't take it away from me. And people were threatening folks, and their switchboards were just, lit up like constantly. And if you got notifications, like, call them now. So they were concerned about the sort of mobilization that they could use with the app to harness the power of like 14-year-olds, I guess. So they really pushed too hard, I think. But not everything is, the Jews. But I guess it makes for some interesting commentary and clicks. And there's some interesting people who are now fans of Candace Owens. So anyway, there's more I could talk about, but I'm going to leave it there for today. And if you still, like Candace Owens for her stuff on BLM, or telling, people life's tough, get a helmet, over the trans stuff, or, I don't know, whatever reason that you follow her and like her. I'm not saying that she can't put out good content here or there, or a good clip, or say things that are true, but she's also saying some things that are blatantly not true. And I just want you to be able to tell the difference and be careful. But I think she should at least apologize to Brian Mast and her followers. and her followers. But that's just my opinion. You guys are entitled to your own. I'm sure there'll be lots of lovely comments. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, you guys can support the website, leave a donation if you can. If you can't, again, I appreciate for all of your time, especially if you got here at the very end. You guys can also check out different merchandise that's available at the store as well. God bless you guys.